The hall was packed, glittering with golden chandeliers, fresh white roses, and guests dressed in their finest attire. Everyone had gathered for what was meant to be the biggest wedding of the year. The bride, Stephanie, stood at the entrance, glowing in her expensive white gown, her heart pounding with excitement. But the moment she stepped forward, she saw the groom's face clearly for the first time. Her smile froze. Her breath caught. Her entire world spun. The groom was not who she thought he was. Her hands trembled. Her legs wobbled. Before anyone could react, Stephanie's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed right there, in the middle of the wedding aisle. 1 week earlier, Stephanie sat across from her best friend Lydia, in a high-end restaurant in Lagos, sipping a glass of fresh orange juice. She tossed her long, straight hair back and let out a soft sigh. "Can you believe it, Lydia?" she said, flashing a wide smile. "I'm finally marrying the man of my dreams. Richard is rich, sophisticated, and everything I ever wanted. This wedding will be like something out of a fairy tale." Lydia, however, wasn't smiling. She twirled her straw in her drink, hesitating before she spoke. "Steph, are you sure about this? I mean, it wasn't too long ago you were with David." Stephanie rolled her eyes dramatically. "Ugh, please don't mention David. That one is a struggling mechanic. What future would I have with a man who spends his days covered in engine oil?" Lydia sighed. "But David truly loved you. He was ready to do anything for you. Do you remember the time he—" "Lydia, enough." Stephanie cut her off. "Love doesn't pay the bills. Richard gives me everything I deserve. Expensive gifts, luxury trips, and most importantly a future. I can't be with someone who can't even afford a proper date night." Lydia looked down, clearly unhappy. She had known Stephanie since childhood, and she had never seen her so blinded by material things before. But there was no convincing her friend now. Meanwhile, across town, David sat in his small workshop, wiping sweat from his forehead. His heart still ached from the breakup. "I really loved her," he mumbled to himself, tightening a bolt on a customer's car. "David, let that girl go," his friend and co-worker Tony said, slapping him on the back. "If she left you for a rich man, good riddance. You deserve better." David forced a smile. "It's not that easy, Tony. I was saving up to marry her. I had dreams for us. I wanted to build a life with her." Tony sighed. "Look, I get it. But listen to me, life has a funny way of teaching people lessons. Just focus on yourself, my guy. Your time will come." David nodded, but deep down, he couldn't shake the pain. Stephanie had meant everything to him. He had given her his heart, his loyalty, everything. And just like that, she had thrown him away for a man with money. 3 days before the wedding, Stephanie was on a shopping spree, picking out the final touches for her wedding. She and Lydia were at an exclusive boutique, where Richard had given her a blank check to buy whatever she wanted. "You see, Lydia?" Stephanie twirled in front of the mirror, admiring her reflection. "This is the life I deserve. No more cheap dates, no more suffering. This is luxury." Lydia forced a smile. "I just hope he loves you as much as you think he does." Stephanie waved her off. "Love? What is love compared to a stable future?" Just then, her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello?" A deep voice replied, "Stephanie, it's me." Her heart skipped a beat. She knew that voice too well. "David." There was silence before he spoke again. "I just called to wish you well. I heard you're getting married. I hope you find happiness." Stephanie swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "David, I don't need your explanation," David cut her off. "Goodbye, Stephanie." The line went dead. Stephanie stared at her phone for a long moment, something unsettling twisting inside her chest. Lydia watched her carefully. "Steph, Are you okay? Stephanie quickly masked her emotions and shrugged. I'm fine. Now, let's go pick out my wedding shoes. The night before the wedding, Stephanie stood in front of the grand mirror in her hotel suite, admiring her wedding gown. It was elegant, expensive, and perfect. Tomorrow, she would become Mrs. Stephanie Okafor, the wife of one of the wealthiest businessmen in town. Yet, despite all the luxury surrounding her, she felt a strange emptiness inside. A small voice in her head whispered, "Are you really making the right choice?" She shook the thought away. "Of course I am," she whispered to herself. "I'm marrying into wealth. I have nothing to regret." But deep inside, doubt began to creep in. The wedding day. The church was breathtaking. Guests filled the hall, music played softly, and photographers snapped endless pictures. Stephanie's heart pounded with excitement as she stood at the entrance, ready to walk down the aisle. But the moment she took a step forward, she saw the groom's face clearly. She froze. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Her hands trembled violently. Her knees wobbled. Her breath hitched. And before anyone could react, Stephanie collapsed, unconscious. Gasps filled the wedding hall. The bride had collapsed. Guests rushed to their feet, whispering in confusion. The band stopped playing. The priest stepped forward in alarm. "Somebody help her." Lydia screamed, pushing through the crowd. Stephanie lay motionless, her elegant white gown sprawled across the marble floor. The wedding planner fanned her desperately, while Richard, the supposed groom, stood frozen in place, his face drained of color. Moments later, Stephanie's eyes fluttered open. But instead of joy, fear clouded them. She turned her head slightly, and there he was. The real groom. Her heart slammed against her chest. No. 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 This wasn't possible. The man standing before her, dressed in a crisp white tuxedo, was not Richard. It was David. Her ex-boyfriend. The same David she had dumped for wealth. The same David she had mocked for being a struggling mechanic. Her lips quivered. "Dee David." A slow, confident smile spread across David's face. "Welcome back, Stephanie," he said, his deep voice steady. "Surprised to see me?" Stephanie's head spun. She couldn't breathe. Her hands gripped her chest as reality hit her like a thunderbolt. She had left David for a rich man. And now, David was the rich man. The entire hall buzzed with murmurs. Some guests whispered among themselves, confused. Others stared in disbelief. Lydia bent down beside Stephanie. "Steph, what's going on? Why are you acting like you've seen a ghost?" Stephanie's lips trembled, but no words came out. She turned to Richard, searching for answers. "What is this? Where is Richard?" Richard, standing just a few feet away, shifted uncomfortably. He ran a hand through his hair, avoiding her gaze. David chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Oh, Stephanie, you really don't know, do you?" Stephanie's stomach twisted. "Know what?" David took a step closer. "Richard isn't who you think he is. He works for me." Silence. A pin could drop in the hall. Stephanie blinked, confused. What are you saying?" David took another step forward, his gaze locking onto hers. "Richard is one of my business partners. We planned this wedding together." Her world tilted. This isn't possible," she croaked, her fingers gripping her veil tightly. "Richard is rich. He owns companies, luxury cars, mansions." David cut her off with a dry laugh. "And who do you think gave him all those things?" Stephanie's breath hitched. David stared at her, his eyes cold and unreadable. "I did." Stephanie's mouth went dry. No, this is a joke. This can't be happening," she muttered, shaking her head violently. David slid his hands into his pockets. "Let me make it simple for you, Stephanie. I am the real billionaire. The cars, the houses, the companies, all of them belong to me." Stephanie's body turned to ice. She turned slowly toward Richard, her eyes filled with horror. "Richard, is this true?" Richard finally lifted his gaze. Shame flickered in his expression. He gave a small nod. Stephanie stumbled back, her legs feeling like jelly. No. This is some kind of sick prank, right?" David chuckled again. "It's not a prank, Stephanie. It's karma." Stephanie felt like she was drowning. Her mind raced back to the moment she had abandoned David, calling him worthless, choosing Richard because of his wealth. But now it turned out. She had only walked away from David to fall into the hands of his employee. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest. "But how?" she whispered. David leaned against the altar, his expression turning serious. "Do you remember when you left me, Stephanie?" She swallowed, unable to speak. "You told me I would never be anything in life. That I would always be a struggling mechanic," David continued, his voice laced with both pain and amusement. "What you didn't know was that I had already started my own auto business. I was working on a big deal that would change my life forever." Stephanie clutched her dress. David smirked. "Months after you left, I signed a multi-million-dollar contract with a global automobile company. Within a year, my business expanded, and I became the CEO of one of the fastest-growing car manufacturing companies in Africa." Stephanie's ears buzzed. David, a billionaire? The same David she had laughed at? The same David she had humiliated? A wave of regret crashed into her like a mighty ocean. Tears filled Stephanie's eyes. "David, please. I didn't know. If I had known, I never would have." David raised a hand, silencing her. "Oh, but you did know, Stephanie. You knew my heart. You knew my love was real. But you wanted money more than love." Stephanie's knees buckled. "David, I made a mistake. Please." David exhaled sharply and looked away. The guests watched in stunned silence. Lydia wiped her eyes. Even she hadn't expected this twist. Stephanie reached out, her fingers trembling. "David, please. I loved you once. We can fix this." David's expression hardened. "No, Stephanie. I have already moved on." Stephanie gasped. No, you can't mean that. "David, I still love you." David let out a deep sigh. "Stephanie, let me ask you something." She nodded quickly, hope flickering in her eyes. "If I were still a mechanic today, if I had never become rich, would you still want me back?" Stephanie opened her mouth, but no words came. Her silence was the answer. David nodded. "That's what I thought." Stephanie broke down in sobs. David turned to Richard. "I believe the wedding is over." Richard nodded. "Yes, boss." David turned to leave. Stephanie, panicked, rushed after him. "David, wait. Please, let me explain." David turned sharply, and for the first time, anger flashed in his eyes. "Stephanie, let me make this clear. You are nothing to me now. You had your chance, and you threw it away. I will never take you back. Ever." Stephanie's chest tightened. "David, please. I love you." David stared at her one last time, then turned his back. He walked out of the church without looking back. The wedding hall was dead silent. The guests, one by one, started leaving. Lydia held onto Stephanie as she collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Richard, embarrassed and ashamed, quietly disappeared through the back door. Stephanie sat there for hours, her makeup ruined, her wedding dress wrinkled, her dreams shattered. She had chased money, and lost the only man who ever truly loved her. And worst of all, she knew she would never get him back. Moral of the story: never judge a person based on their current situation. Life can change in an instant. True love is more valuable than money. Karma always has a way of teaching people painful lessons.